Hello, friends. Thank you for your continued patience as I figure this shit out. Bad sound quality, bad visuals, and decor like I'm in a 1957 dim sum diner in Los Angeles, Chinatown. Nonetheless, this is the setting for today's topic, which is the question of spiritual authority and the adjacent question of, do you need a teacher, a spiritual teacher? 2 years into my life as a full-time Zen student, I asked my teacher for ordination, Tokudo Shiki. I wanted to become a monk. One of the most salient memories I have as a monk was the moment where I had to do 3 great bows before my parents, who were sitting in chairs at the Butsudan or altar during my ordination. So you go down, you give these, you're completely on your hands and knees, and you're giving these full bows to your parents, right? So I later found out that the reason you do this is tied up, as all things were at my monastery, with a very traditional Japanese monastic custom. So what was happening during those bows I did before my parents was I was saying goodbye. I didn't know it at the time, but I felt something like that happening. This is the model that I was trained in, okay? Your teacher takes responsibility for you to some degree, and you give your devotion to the teacher. And yet at the same time, I always felt like my teacher was telling me, your practice is fully your responsibility. Your life is fully your responsibility. On the one hand. On the other hand, he was a patriarch. He was had a personality of leadership, you could say, of even dominance, of even controlling in some aspects. Every teacher has a personality. My teacher's personality was type A. So my time at the monastery was always walking this razor's edge. On the one hand, ultimately, my journey down the path of Zen practice was entirely my responsibility, on the one hand. On the other hand, I had to open myself up completely to my teacher and receive what he was saying. Because ultimately, for me, Zen practice was not about inventing my own truth or taking some idea I had about spirituality and projecting it writ large upon the world. That is just not Zen practice. And sometimes I handled this balance better than other times. I remember one winter I had been up since 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had been out in my robes and my hat and my glove shoveling, because we were up in a mountain at I think it was 6,800 feet, and there was a lot of snow that winter. So I was out shoveling for hours upon hours upon hours. I woke up at 2 a.m. It was 4 a.m. I went to meet with my teacher before our temple, our Zen center engaged in koan practice, and I was like close to tears. I was ready to break down. I had been exhausted for about a month and a half straight, and I almost couldn't stand anymore. And I remember going in and collapsing in these sopping wet, frozen robes in front of my teacher, and my lip trembling, basically expressing to him that I was at my wit's end. And I waited. I waited for the turning phrase you hear about in the classic Zen texts. I waited for my teacher to say or do something that would fill me with chi and spiritual energy and bhakti, like the great Vedantic gurus filling their acolytes with spiritual energy. I needed something, okay? Give me a break. I needed a jolt of spiritual cappuccino in that moment. And I remember this was 4 o'clock in the morning, and he looks at me, and he barks something at his attendant in Japanese, and she scurries into the other room, and I'm like, I'll bet you he's bringing some text from his teacher, and he's going to read it to me, and it's going to change my life. And she comes in holding a bottle of cognac. She sets down a little glass. She pours it, she hands it to me. My teacher just kind of sat there looking at me. And like, maybe I was really open for a teaching in that moment, so I made something out of it that wasn't there. But the lesson I took away from that was, bro, you're on your own. I can't do shit for you. Take a shot. like monk up, man up, do your job. You got a whole week of retreat ahead of you. My point is, when I was at my best with my teacher, the relationship was extremely, extremely intimate, but it was not personal. So the question of whether or not you need a teacher, ultimately only you can decide that. I needed one. When I met my teacher, I was kind of lost, and he proved to be an extraordinary and spectacular, humble, beautiful, depthlessly brilliant Zen master in many, many ways. In many other ways, I found him to be kind of a stubborn, flawed human being. So he fulfilled all my expectations and my hopes and my dreams as a Zen master on the one hand, and on the other hand, he reminded me that even Zen masters are people too, okay? So the one thing I took away from that I'd like to impart to you here is know what you want from your teacher. Know what you want and be clear about it before you get into a teacher-student relationship, okay? So when you go to a Zen master, you are not going to get stock tips. You're not going to get advice on what you should do with your life. You don't want to know how to deal with a problem in your marriage, okay? The Zen teacher is there to teach you Zen practice, okay? The principles and the practice, that's their job. It's your job to take all of that and whatever wisdom arises from it and apply it to your life. So keep your relationship with your teacher as clear and as clean as possible. They're there to teach you Zen practice, and you're there to receive those teachings. You are going to get from the teacher exactly the level of seriousness and focus and dearth of mistakes that you put into it. So when you go into that room to meet with your teacher privately, or you're having some interaction with them, keep that relationship as clear and clean as possible. You're there to learn Zen practice. You're not there to have the teacher sprinkle spiritual fairy dust on you that solves all your problems. One should not go looking for a teacher, okay? You ultimately have to learn to sit and meditate on your own, okay? Sooner or later, you've got to learn to do it on your own. And the way you learn to do something on your own is you do it on your own, okay? But eventually, if you sit long enough and you meditate long enough on your own, you're going to come up against some difficulties, okay? It's kind of like anything. Like, the more you do it initially, the more you realize you're not so good at it, okay? That's how it works when you're first starting something. At that point, you may need help. It's like this moment of beautiful desperation. A teacher is someone who's been in similar terrain, experienced similar difficulties, and can help you navigate the difficult terrain of a meditation practice and a Zen practice. When you find someone like that, it's precious. It's a precious, precious relationship. Cherish that relationship. Honor that relationship. Give that relationship your best, okay? By which I mean, devote yourself to that which the teacher is devoted to, and not necessarily to the teacher his or herself. So it ultimately really doesn't matter if the teacher likes you, or if the teacher is affirming you in any way, shape, or form, or if the teacher loves you, or if you even like or love your teacher. What ultimately matters, and one does well to focus on this with laser precision, what ultimately matters is whether or not you are manifesting the essence of the teachings or Zen practice together. And if you manifest your relationship with the teacher in this way, then there's the opportunity for the wisdom of the tradition to jump from the teacher to you in some sort of interesting, magical, beautiful, logical process, which I don't quite understand, just like a lit candle transferring a flame to an unlit candle. So Zen practice can be very hierarchical. It can be even a little bit anachronistic. It can be challenging. There's a lot of form. There's a lot of ritual. There's a lot of competitiveness in meditation and Zen communities. It's easy to lose your way if you're not careful. Too often, we want the teacher to tell us what to do and how to do it. I think a better approach is do it. Do the practice. Then approach your teacher honestly and share where you're at. Open yourself up, receive the teacher's response, then let it go and go back and do your practice. So a few months after my Tokudo Shiki, when I was a monk, I was ambitious and excited, and I really wanted to impress my teacher, basically. And I remember bringing him down to our dining hall, which was kind of like the green room before he would go in and give his public lectures or his teishos during a retreat. And you had this, he was probably 102, 103 years old at that time. And we would help him out of his rucksu and into his kesa. He had these beautiful, very, very old robes that the kesa was given to him by his teacher, along with his fan, his little wooden and paper fan, very old, delicate, red wooden paper fan. I remember him sitting down in his chair, and he had horrible sciatica, and so he was in pain, and he was so old, and he was so tired. And I remember him looking down in his lap and picking up his red wooden fan and handing it to me. He said, "Oh, this is yours now. You take responsibility. This is yours." And I kept that fan, and I still have it with me here while I live in Vienna. Now, giving a student your fan is, this is tricky, so I'm going to try and be clear here. Traditionally, that is one way that teachers would initiate an Inka process. Inka is when the teacher says, "You're a Zen master now. You have permission to teach at the level that I'm teaching at. You get it. You've completed your training." Obviously, that is not what was happening there. It was a gift to me. And how I took that gift, how I interpreted that moment was, look, buddy, I'm 103 years old. I look at you, you young kid in your 30s, you're helping me, you're giving everything you've got to this practice in your own way as best as you possibly can. I'm honoring that. You know, whether or not you complete your training, are considered to be enlightened, have the bottom of the bucket drop out, and experience the kind of Kensho or Satori from which there is no turning back, who knows? Probably not. But like whatever you are, wherever you are, here's your fan. Here's your permission to be the kind of student you are and to keep practicing your heart out. And don't let, if I die next week, look at this fan and remember that you have everything you need to go as far as one can go in a practice where there is no space or distance or good or bad. And teachers can help you, but they can't carry you over the finish line. Something like that. Okay, that's all. Tschüss, as we say here in Vienna, which means bye-bye.